Hello and welcome to my video, all about how to hand sew a flat-felled seam using the whip stitch. This is a sturdy and durable seam which is also reversible. It's best suited to lighter weight woven fabrics because the seam contains 4 layers of fabric, so using a heavyweight fabric would make the seam very bulky. If you wanted to replicate the look of a machine sewn flat-felled seam instead, you could take a look at my video about those seams, and instead of using a machine sewn straight stitch, you would use a hand sewn back stitch. However, I do prefer the version I'm going to show you today because it just has that nice hand sewn charm. This seam technique is actually the same as is used in traditional Korean patchwork, and in Korea this seam is called a Ssamsol seam. It's used primarily to make single layer patchwork by hand from scraps of silk and other fine fabrics. These patchwork cloths are called Pojagi, and they don't need to be lined because these seams are reversible. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is fold over double the width of fabric on one edge compared to the other edge. In my case, I folded over one fabric edge by 1/4 inch and the other by 1/2 inch. Then press these folds in place with your iron. Place the folded over edges together and then thread a sharp hand sewing needle. It's quite decorative, so you could choose to use a contrasting rather than matching thread if you wish. I'm just using some all-purpose polyester thread in white. Make a knot at the end of the thread and then pin your fabric pieces together to keep them in place whilst you sew. Then take your needle up through a fold on one side, starting from the inside. Because I came up through the fold at the back, I then took the needle through both fabrics from back to front. You can go through from front to back instead if you wish, but whichever direction you choose now will be what you use for the rest of the stitches. Then just repeat this over and over all along the edge, trying to stitch very close to that edge. To make the stitches as neat as possible, keep them consistent and an equal distance apart. You can remove the pins as you sew. On the last stitch, take the needle through the fabric to the inside. Then go in and out of the folded over edge. Tighten the thread until it forms a loop. Take the needle through the loop and tighten. Then repeat this again, taking the needle through the loop once or twice. If you now open out the fabric, you can see all of those diagonal stitches you've just made. On the other side of the fabric now, you need to fold the wider edge over the narrower edge, and then fold that over again to completely hide the raw edge. Then press those folds in place. Your seam should now look like this. Then fold the fabric like this. There should be vertical stitches facing you. Then you just repeat the exact steps you did previously to whip stitch all along this edge. Again, keeping close to the edge and spacing the stitches an even distance apart. The stitches should only be a few millimeters apart because seams with more stitches are stronger. Again, I stitch from back to front and secure the thread at the beginning and the end. Lastly, just press your seam with an iron and you should end up with something like this. As you can see, you get both diagonal and vertical stitches on each side, which I think is a nice decorative feature. And of course the raw edges are completely enclosed inside the seam. This seam ended up being approximately 1/4 inch wide. And that's it, that's how you hand sew a flat felled seam using the whip stitch. I really hope you found that useful, and thank you very much for watching.